Daniel Kostick presents Premiership Elections in Albertan History. This election took place on March 20th, 1989, and was the 22nd election in the province's history. Having been returned to government with a reduced majority, Premier Getty and the Progressive Conservatives were again forced to contend with the recent recession. In contrast with the United Farmers government during the Great Depression, Getty provided $2 billion in loan guarantees to farmers and tax incentives and credits for exploratory and developmental drilling projects. Other notable actions of the term included the PC's efforts towards reforestation, which resulted in Alberta being the only jurisdiction which saw an increase in forest area. In 1986, just before the previous election, Getty announced demands for changes to the Western Accord, most notably the elimination of the petroleum and gas revenue tax. As this tax provided approximately $1 billion to the federal government, Federal Minister of Energy, Mines and Resources, Patricia Carney, was hesitant towards a full repeal. Echoing the policy of the Poli-Hi government, Getty expressed willingness to cease extra-provincial gas exports until fair pricing was agreed upon. Despite talks stalling in 1986, Getty ultimately prevailed, and the tax was eliminated in October of that year. In spite of early concerns surrounding loss of investment capital, the development was applauded by the province as the first step to recovery of the energy sector. This would be a short-lived victory, though, as the federal PC government under Brian Mulroney declined to support Alberta oil projects. Notable about the Getty government, despite it being a predominantly center-right and conservative movement, it oversaw major growth and expansion of government ministries. 7 new ministries were created, including tourism, technology, research and telecommunications, and social services. Comparingly, only the ministries of housing, international trade, and manpower were either abolished or reorganized into other ministries. The government also began heavily investing in the private sector, and while this would see short-term gains via increased retail sales and recovered production, this would come crashing during another recession and sink the provincial economy. Despite leading the Liberals back into the legislature, party members began to sour on Nicholas Taylor, MLA for Westlock Sturgeon, after over a decade of his leadership. This culminated in a leadership review in 1987, which saw Taylor ousted as leader and issued the writ for a leadership election the following year. In the race, 3 candidates would run: Lawrence Decore, the mayor of Edmonton, Grant Mitchell, MLA for Edmonton Meadowlark, and Taylor running to get his job back. Despite allegations of organizing an internal party coup d'etat against Taylor, Decore would win an overwhelming victory on the first ballot. Following his win, Decore began to take the party down a different path compared to his predecessors. He would place his focus on advocating for fiscal responsibility and attacking the Getty government's rising debt and involvement in the private sector. This would make Getty the most right-wing leader of the party since Alexander Rutherford, and the party as a whole would shift right and occupy the same space that was previously solely held by the PCs. After the best showing for the NDP since the days of the CCF, the party enjoyed a relatively long political honeymoon period. Ray Martin, MLA for Edmonton Norwood, also enjoyed popularity among Albertans during the term. However, setbacks would start to come after Decore became Liberal Party leader and the policy realignments that came with it. While the NDP had always been to the left of both the Liberals and PCs, the shift in Liberal policy served to give the NDP a more extremist appearance. As Decore was also a popular mayor of Edmonton, the party also began seeing a decline in support in its stronghold areas. In 1986, the Western Canada Concept, Social Credit, and the Heritage Party entered talks to form one political entity called the Alberta Alliance. Talks soon fell apart as the WCC exited the talks and later folded as virtually all of its support had left for other parties. They were followed by Social Credit, who would again run candidates after sitting out the previous election. As much of the party's support base had left for the PCs and representative parties, the party only continued to exist on the political fringe. Despite this, elements of the last Socred government still sat in the legislature under the representative banner. Raymond Speaker, MLA for Littlebow, had been serving since 1963 during the height of the party's popularity. Walter Buck, MLA for Cloverbar, had been in office since 1967 and had even made a run for party leadership in 1968, losing to Harry Strom. Recognizing that the days of Social Credit had long since come to an end, Buck chose to not seek re-election while Speaker crossed the floor to the PCs in 1989. This left the Representative Party with no MLAs, and while the party remained registered, it would not run any candidates in the election. Getty surprised watchers with a snap election call 1 year before his term was up. During the campaign, the PCs were dogged by the increasingly poor state of the economy. Getty continued to be trapped within the expectations set by Lougheed's legacy and plagued by a streak of unluckiness.
I'm not defensive about losing seats at all. I want to win a majority. I mean, that's what elections are all about, to elect a government, and a majority does that.
After the Liberals shifted their party ideology into the PC space, the PCs lost more support. This especially was accurate, as the Liberals were the only party between them, the PCs, and the NDP advocating for the government to get out of the private sector, which was seen as a primary driver of economic woes. And here are the results. Don Getty won, winning 59 out of a possible 83 seats and 44.29% of the popular vote, down 2 seats and 7.11% since 1986. Next came Ray Martin, whose NDP won 16 seats and 26.29% of the popular vote, even in seats and down 2.93% since 1986. Next came Lawrence Decore, whose Liberals won 8 seats and 28.68% of the popular vote, up 4 seats and 16.46% since 1986. Finally came Harvey Ewell, whose Social Credit Party won 0 seats and 0.47% of the popular vote. Despite winning the most seats and once again forming government, Getty would lose his own seat of Edmonton-Whitemud to the Liberal candidate. He would be the second premier in Alberta history to lose his seat in a general election, the other being Richard Reid, who lost his seat when the United Farmers were swept out of the legislature in 1935.
Obviously, I'm very disappointed about losing here in Whitemud. That has been a puzzle for me. I'm going to take some time to think about it.
While keeping its seat totals roughly even, the popular vote was the worst since the PCs formed government. The NDP experienced a dip in its popular support, placing third behind the Liberals, but maintained the seats needed to continue as the official opposition. On the other hand, the Liberals had their best election result since 1955, when they won 15 seats and 31.13%. This result showed that the rebrand and new identity had worked, and for the first time since 1921, the party had placed itself into a position to potentially form government in the next election. Despite the personal loss in his riding, Getty did not resign as party leader or premier, and instead won a by-election in Stettler a few months later, returning to the legislature. I'll see you in the next one.